Hey everybody, it's Karen Murphy with Karen Murphy Coaching. Going live today is Wednesday at 12:30. It's my intent to be here almost every Wednesday. I think it shifts sometimes when I'm on the road, but here I am today. And I got really inspired to talk about sibling issues, connection-based sibling issues, supporting our kids when they're getting into challenges with siblings. This information is going to be useful to dealing with issues with friends as well as siblings, or issues with adult siblings. If you have issues with your siblings, this might be useful. So ask me your questions. When you get in here, let me know, give me a thumbs up or a hello. And if you have any questions coming up about siblings and about how to respond in the most constructive way possible when challenges come up, please pop them in the comments. I'd love to get into your specific questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the framework of the connection-based parenting model and how to come at the issue, like this, shift the angle so that we're coming at it in the most constructive way possible. Recommendations on what to do in those moments as a parent and how to support our kids. And then I'm going to give you a real life story, an anecdote I just heard of something that happened recently to someone in our community. Going to be completely anonymous, but I chose this story because I think it's universal, and likely all of us parents have been in this situation that this parent was in on some level. Okay, so we're going to share the story, and we're going to talk about again, the connective measures, what we can do in those moments, and get clear on some of those. So it's going to be lots of good stuff. If this sounds like something that would be useful to people you know, please share it. And let's dive right in. Okay, so if you've been with me for a while, you know I have this framework of understanding how emotions flow in patterns. And so I'm going to invite you to that awareness right away. It's a little warm here in Oregon. So we have heart zone. This is when our emotions are balanced, coherent, in alignment, and all is good in the world and we're getting along with each other. Then we have edge zone. That's where we're starting to lose disconnection. I say we, but this is true for every person, so you can think about your child. Child moves into disconnect and gets into edge zone. And then there's outer rim zone, where there's complete disconnect and big emotions flowing and maybe some aggression. Depends on your child and how they show up in each of these zones. So when kids get into issues with siblings, almost guaranteed they're not in heart zone. They are in edge zone or outer rim zone. They've lost their inner sense of connection. Otherwise, they wouldn't be having this challenging moment that they couldn't handle on their own, right? If it's coming to your awareness, likely it's something that they need support with. Now, I mean, you can certainly engage with each other's siblings from heart zone and work things through, but young children, they need support, and oftentimes getting into a conflict with somebody like a sibling can really tip them over into disconnect. Okay, because it is challenging. We actually don't often learn how to deal with conflict in our culture very well. So it's a lot to expect from children to have this figured out. And so oftentimes they get into disconnect because it's challenging and it's hard and it pokes at our emotions, right? Pokes at our sensitive spots. Siblings are super good at poking at our sensitive spots. You can think about, if you have a sibling, how that worked for you in your own childhood. In fact, the patterns that happen between you and any siblings that you had or have might well be the patterns that are coming forward within your own family, because we recycle the patterns that are within us into our current nuclear family, right? And so your partner and their sibling patterns, you and your sibling patterns, those might be showing up between your kids. Think about that. It's a good insight to kind of do that little excavation work. Okay, so let's say that we've assessed that our child is in the edge zone and is getting into, so here's what happens in the edge zone. Our children are seeking, they're disconnected, and so it shows up in their emotional state, in their thinking, and in their behavior, right? That's how we as a parent can assess what zone they're in. So I recommend this highly, and you've probably heard this from me before, to observe your children lots when they are flowing emotions, when they're moving through these zones, so that you can identify what it looks like for your child, your specific, this specific child, when he or she is in the edge zone. What does that look like for them? Because it's a little different for every child, right? If you have more than one child, you know that it's a little bit different per child. Because you want to be able to recognize them when they're in edge zone, so that you can come in with the most useful support possible. You want to be able to see that moment when they've tipped over into edge, if possible. Ideally, not always possible, but ideally. So when any of us, including our kids, have slipped out of heart zone and we're in the edge zone, okay, so it doesn't feel good inside, right? Our emotions get stirred up, our thinking gets a little limited and faulty and critical, and it doesn't feel so good in our physical body. If we're tuned in, we'll notice. It gets a little tight, right? Tense. And so that ripples out into our behavior. And one of the coping methods that we as humans have developed when we're in this state of edge zone is to pull other people into it with us to help us process. We have this phenomena of pulling people into it to help us process, because there's this thing that happens where we mirror for each other. I'm not sure if this might be a new concept or if it's something that you've heard before, but we tend to project our own issues onto the people closest to us, and subconsciously ask them to reflect ourselves back to us in this aspect and engage with us. And that way we can engage our issues with this other person. Now, this isn't the optimal way to deal with our issues, but it is a way that humans often do this. And when we're not conscious, when we're subconsciously engaging, which is what's most likely happening when we're in the edge zone, we're not really tuned into our conscious thinking. We can project and pull people in to mirror our stuff back to us as this faulty way of trying to move this stuff through, right? As a faulty way to process. So it's all subconscious, but it's what happens when we get into drama spins with each other and conflict spins. It's at the root of all wars and conflicts. And so we see this with our kids. Our kids are trying this out, right? And sometimes you will have a child who's just fine in their heart zone, happily playing, and then the sibling who's found themselves on the edge zone, seeking a way to get out, looking for the exit to the edge zone, and is like, there's their sibling, the person who's most like them on the planet because of shared DNA, shared life experience. It's like, it's almost another me, except they're wearing this other skin. Subconsciously pull them into it by pulling that sibling into the drama, maybe by teasing them, maybe by some annoying behavior that they know will poke the sibling, right? Some behavior that's going to really drive that sibling crazy and pull them into this disconnect with me as this, again, a coping method of how to move through. So that's what's happening below the surface of the behaviors. What we see as parents is like sibling one is perfectly happy and sibling two is throwing rocks at sibling one, as this annoying attempt to get behavior to get them to get pulled into edge zone with them so that they can, move this stuff around, thinking that that's going to help them, or not thinking, but subconsciously thinking that's a way to get out. Okay, so that's what we as parents want to do, is assess the situation, assess who is disconnected here. Okay, so it's the child throwing rocks. I'm going to send the child who's pretty happy off on their own, go address the child throwing rocks, but I'm not going to do it with a corrective measure, which is the old program of parenting. I would be punishing or chastising in some way. That's the old program, right? I'm going to bring in a connective measure, because I know that at the heart of this issue is not that my child doesn't know better, not that my child doesn't know that that's not okay to throw rocks at their sibling. That at the heart of this issue is my child is disconnected from their knowing, disconnected from their conscious knowing of what's appropriate and not appropriate. And so the best way to get them back to their conscious knowing is to connect reconnect, show them the pathway out of edge zone, and bring in connective, a measure of support. Okay, what do you think about that? Let me know how that lands. It might be a shift in paradigm to think about it from this way. It's not the old program. This is a new program. This is a much more emotionally intelligence-based program. Okay. And it's okay to have resistance show up because that old program is inside us. You know, if you were parented by the old program, it is your scaffolding, right? It's like that's the program you downloaded into your hardware. And so shifting to a new program is a process, and it's okay to take your time with this. But if this is really resonating, that's awesome. And you're like, maybe that scaffolding is still there, and maybe it's getting lighter and lighter and lighter, and it's just like the threads of it are still there, getting challenged or getting, you know, popping up for disintegration, so that you can establish this new program, download fully the new program. Okay. Again, any questions, let me know. Feel free to add them to the comments. Even if you don't catch this live, you can add the comments and I will pop back in here to reply back. Okay, so let's see, we've assessed the zones, we've brought in connective measures. So here's the thing, if your kids are, that's an edge zone scenario. What if your kids are in outer rim zone? And what if kid number 2 throwing the rocks has already disconnected kid number, or invited disconnect, or the kid number 1 has taken kid number 2 up on it and gotten triggered and is now in the edge zone with kid number 2. So maybe you've got 2 kids in the edge zone. Big challenges for parents. We all know that, how this happened. Like, we've all been there, right? So you have 2 kids in the edge zone, and the more they spin with each other on that attempt to move this, you know, the more drama they're going to create. They might start yelling at each other. They might even get physical and move into aggression. So aggressive behavior, again, it's the behavior. And I want to remind you that all of that, the yelling, the language, the aggression, behavior, those are symptoms of inner disconnect for both of them. Okay, so as a parent, our biggest recommendation is to get in there between them as soon as possible so that they don't hurt each other emotionally or physically, right? Obviously, we know this. This is common sense. We don't want anybody to get hurt. And so, again, the more we can be paying attention to what edge zone sounds like, we can be listening for the ramping up of voices, we can be listening for the ramping up of language, so that we can move in and pull them apart from each other and bring in the connective measures. Now, if it's gotten to the outer rim zone where emotions get really heightened, language gets really loud, and you're probably in outer rim zone if it's starting to get physical, then because all kids know that that's not appropriate when they're in the heart zone. They have to be pretty far out on outer rib zone if it's getting physical. Okay, so then the recommendation is to set a limit. You have to be really strong in that moment, right? You have to come with a strong limit. No one is going to get hurt here. So I'm going to not allow that hitting, kicking, whatever to happen. I'm going to do everything I can to stop that action, to stop that behavior, to keep everybody safe. But I'm not going to do it with blaming judgment. This is the difference from the old program. I'm not going to be coming in and blaming anybody for the symptoms. I'm going to be coming in really firm and strong, and I'm going to stop the behavior. But I'm not going to blame or bring the heaviness of judgment into this, because that is simply judging them for the symptoms, and that only fuels disconnect. Okay, if I bring in heavy judgment and blame, then I'm going to be adding fuel to their fire. It's going to be counterproductive to what I truly want, which is for everybody to be in heart zone and connecting, right? So if I want to get us back into heart zone as quickly as possible, I'm going to do my best to separate them to the point where I've stopped that behavior where they can really hurt each other. And I'm going to assess who is the most disconnected here in this moment. And hey, good to be with you. Oh, Diane, I'm happy you're joining me. I'm talking about siblings. Do you know anything about sibling issues? We've all experienced it, right? We know this. This is part of our human conditioning to deal with stuff with siblings. So, if there's been if we're stepping in to set a limit between two siblings who are getting to the point where they are yelling or maybe hurting, on the edge of hurting each other, then we come in strong, we separate, and then we assess without judgment who is most off track here, who is the most disconnected from their true knowing, their true connection. Okay, and ideally, if we have another adult in the space with us, we're going to ask them to come and take charge of the other person. You have lots of these because you have lots of beautiful siblings. Yeah, the more siblings we have, the more we get the opportunity to do this work together with our siblings. Okay, so I just want to reiterate that when we get into challenges or conflict with our sibling, is we're not engaging from our heart zone, which is where we're connected, right? Where we're connected with our conscious mind, conscious heart. We are disconnected from that awareness, and that's where we spin on kind of cycles of drama that we're trying to get ourselves back into connection, but it's not going to get us there. And so instead, the recommendation is to pull back from that engagement and get connection taken care, go get connected. So if you're a parent coming with between two kids, you go to the kid who's most disconnected and you bring connection. And if you are two adults, you go, if you're one of the adults that's been engaging in the issue, you go take care of yourself and get reconnected to yourself. And you just kind of let that other person go take care of themselves, hopefully. Or, that's actually their business. Your business is just you and your connection, and you go take care of yourself. And then later you can re-engage when you're both in heart zone if it's necessary. Now, for the kid situation, old parenting program says, I need to bring in corrective measures. I need to make sure my kid knows that it's not okay to yell at his brother, right? I need to make sure that he knows that it's not okay to go punch his brother in the shoulder. So I want to confirm for everybody that your kid knows that already. When they're in heart zone, they absolutely know what's appropriate and not appropriate with their siblings. It's just the disconnect that's showing up that's clouding their knowing. So that corrective measure is not needed in this moment. What's needed is reconnection to their inner knowing. And we do that by offering them connection. So, okay, so let's talk about connective measures. Connective measures are coming in to listen. Coming in and saying, hey, it looks like you guys are having a conflict here. I'd love to support you. What's going on? And you're doing this with one kid at a time, right? Because if you have two, they're still going to be trying to, to work it through in the drama method. But if you can separate out and do one kid at a time and just hold a space for the listening and allow them to tell the story, and all you're doing is listening. You're not trying to fix or solve or comfort or any of those measures that are sort of conflict resolution-y. Because right now, there's too much emotion. If they're in the edge zone or outer rim zone emotionally, there's too much clutter getting in the way for clear thinking to be engaged. So you just need to support them to release that clutter. Sometimes telling the story can help, but usually telling the story takes you to an emotional place. And when they get there, then you just really want to hold space for them to express, whether it's anger, sadness, grief, fear, anxiety. All of those things are really commonly under the surface of our conflicts, right? So when they get to that place of feeling something, then you want to support them to move those feelings and just express. So it might be tears, so you just hold space while they cry. It might be anger, so maybe you hold a pillow and they can just move it through, right? Maybe they need to dance, so you turn on the music and you allow them to dance furiously through whatever emotion is coming up. All of those would be really awesome connective measures. And again, you're not expressing any judgment because this engagement, this conflict was a symptom of inner connect and disconnect. So Judgment of symptoms doesn't help. How does that sound? So I'm going to tell a story that can demonstrate this. It's from somebody in our community, so I'm going to keep it anonymous. But I chose this story because, again, it's really universal. For any of us who are raising kids, we've probably been in this situation. And I thought it was a really useful one to demonstrate this. So there's a parent and has 2 kids, and the younger sibling, he's helping the child ride the tricycle, learning some mastery skill on riding the tricycle. So this is a younger child. And then the older child is really good at bike riding and is already bike riding around. And so dad is focused on the younger child, but the older sibling is kind of getting in the way, is disrupting the focus session between dad and younger sibling. So the older child starts, biking around the 2 and kind of getting in the, disrupting the interaction between dad and the younger child. So dad says, hey, can you please go play over there with your friend? Go ride your bike over there for a little bit. I'm going to focus on younger child, and I'll come connect in with you later. But the older child doesn't do that, doesn't listen, doesn't respond receptively, and continues to do this behavior of interruption, this interruptive behavior. So that is a sign of disconnect. If your child is not able to receive your request, a reasonable request, isn't able to hear that and then respond, then that's a sign your child is not fully connected and is in the edge zone and probably needs some support of some kind. So what happened with this dad, because he was focused on this younger child, he kind of had an agenda, probably, as we do as parents, to help this younger child and really master these skills that she was working on. So as the older child kept getting more and more disruptive to that engagement, he started using some leverage that most of us parents have used at one time or another, and started threatening to take away some of this older child's privileges. So saying something like, hey, you're going to have less TV time later today if you keep doing this behavior, right? So that's an old parenting program method of trying to get the behavior we want, right? We're leveraging something our child loves, TV time. This is an example. I've shifted some of the details of this story, but that's a common one, right? Like video game time, or something your child values. We want to take a little bit of that away as leverage to get them to comply with our request, the behavior we want. But because this child was disconnected, she's in edge zone, she didn't care. It didn't work for her because she's not thinking consciously. Who cares what happens 5 hours from now with her TV time when she is disconnected in this moment? That would require higher consciousness thinking, and she's not there, right? She's disconnected, so who cares? That didn't work for her. That didn't get the behavior he wanted. She continued to, what she's doing is she's trying to message to her dad that, hey, I'm disconnected, I need support. But she doesn't know how to do that constructively. Like, children, we don't have those emotional intelligence communication skills down yet. Many adults, we still don't have those communication skills down pat yet. These are not skills that we are taught normally in our culture. So it's common for us to have them reveal themselves to our parents through the behavior, the disconnected behavior. Parents need to be reading the behavior to be able to decode what's going on with my child's inner state. And so what happens when a child is disconnected and has given the message through the disconnected behavior to the child, but the parent isn't getting the message? And so maybe the parent, like in this case, the parent was like, okay, I'm going to take away more of her TV time. Let's up the ante and even use higher leverage, right? Increase leverage. Still didn't work for the child because it's the wrong, he's going at it the wrong way, right? The way that's not getting to the root of the issue. And in fact, the child's behavior is getting even more intense because when we don't pay attention to the message, the symptom, the behavior has to get bigger, right? The message has to get more intense so that it gets louder. Instead of just being this little white flag of, hey, dad, I'm disconnected, I need your help, it becomes this neon sign of like, I'm really disconnected, I need your help. That's the metaphor of the behavior. So, in retrospect, what the father reviewed this scenario later in the day. He recognized that his attempts to use the leverage that he used of the TV time didn't work. And he kind of reviewed what could have gone better. And so this was his review. He thought, well, okay, so my child was disconnected. My older child needed some support. What I should have done, what I could have done, was to invite in another adult, because there was another adult on the scene, to be with the younger child. The younger child was in heart zone. She was just fine. She was having a great time with her dad, but she would have been fine with this other adult for a little bit of time too. And so he could have invited that other adult to be with the younger child, freeing him up to go support the older child to get reconnected. And so instead of going to that older child with corrective measures like, hey, that's not okay, hey, now we're gonna, I'm gonna punish you, or I'm gonna take away a privilege, that's the old program. Instead, he would bring in connection, which would get to the root cause of why she was showing up with that behavior, right? So a connective measure would have been, hey, I've got 15 minutes. I can tell that you could love some time with me. So in these 15 minutes, I want to see all your biking tricks. Show me every trick you've got. I'd love to see them all. Or he could say, hey, you know what? I can tell you really need some support. So I'm here. I've got 15 minutes. Why don't you, what do you want to do together? Leave it up to her. Let her choose what she wants to do with her dad. So that, again, he's not bringing in judgment of her behavior. He's bringing in full-on connection. He's eager to connect with his presence, his eye contact, his enthusiasm for her skills or whatever it is she wants to do with him. And so his intent is to fill her up for this next little bit of time, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, so that she's reconnected by the end of that time, and he can go back and engage with the younger child, and she will likely be happy to go play with her friend. That's a really common scenario. It doesn't take much to reconnect a child who's in edge zone. Now, if she was in outer rim zone, if she was getting really ramped up and disconnected and was starting to feel some big emotional upset, that would have taken a different response. He might have come to her and say, hey, I can see you're having a hard time. Tell me what's going on. And he would have moved into holding space for her emotional expression. So those are some options, different options. Now, I want to tell you a little bit more about how siblings work together. So from an expanded consciousness perspective, we come into this experience to work, to grow and to expand our consciousness, our awareness of ourselves. And so siblings and our family of origin, they're all in our life to help us do that in big ways. And in fact, from a soul level perspective, we've actually chosen each other to work on issues together. So you could think of every sibling in your life as someone who is here to work with you and for you to work with them to bring up the stuff that will bring you into deeper connection with yourself. So that's kind of a beautiful way to think about siblings, and maybe an empowering way to think about it, because if we have that consciousness as we engage with our siblings and as we support our kids to engage with their siblings, then there's nothing wrong here, right? But there is a faster way and there's a slower way. And there's a way that, that engages in the disconnect with each other and kind of spins on drama. And there's the way that pulls back from that into awareness and engaging connection for ourselves, that is the more empowered way to actually expand and grow through the engagement, right? So I've said this before, that every time we get stressed out or triggered emotionally or mentally, those are invitations to go into deeper awareness of our own inner connection. And truthfully, it's connection with our our higher self, our divinity, connection with God, it's all aligned there, right? The more connected we are to ourselves, the more that we have connection with God, with source, with however language you use. And so all of these things, these triggers, are guiding us into that expanded consciousness, deeper connection. And so our siblings are really like our, in effect, they're soulmates with us. And I'm talking about soulmates beyond romantic partnership concept, like the big way. Like everyone that's close to us in our lives is in a sense, a soulmate. And we're all supporting each other to get back into expanded awareness, connection, consciousness. So, it's a sacred relationship in that way. And your kids have chosen their siblings for this purpose. And it's also true for cousins and partners. And, all those people that are really close to us are the ones that trigger us the most, right? And it's for this purpose. It's for this bigger purpose. So, hope that's useful. Please let me know any questions or comments in the way. I hope there was just enough mix of practical and useful and applicable and real life story with sort of the expanded perspective. And let me know what you think. Comment below if this is useful to you. Come back next Wednesday. I'll have another Q&A with any other questions that have come up over the week. I'll address them next Wednesday, 12:30 Pacific, here on this Facebook business page. Okay? Have a great day. Much love to you. Take good care. Bye for now.